Okay, there you go. Take it away, Brian.
Okay, welcome. I'm Brian Martin, a past president of the club and a current officer at large, and I'll be leading this portion of the meeting, the candidate forum. For full transparency, we have several club officers who have endorsed or donated to various candidates who were in this race, and those of us who have not done so are will be running this the relevant parts of this part of the meeting, this candidate forum, and I'm one of those people. And I see we have, so what we'll be doing is candidates will have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. Then and we have City Council Member Jordan, who will be an Officer Jordan, who will be um, doing the timer. So you should look for that in the corner of your Zoom window. And before we get too far, I'd like to also acknowledge any electeds that we have here who are not candidates. And we do have Albany City Council members, Vice Mayor Mickey, Mayor Tiedemann, and also City Council Member Jordan here. And then some of the candidates are also electeds. I'm not going to go through them, and if you, because you'll get in turn, you'll see all of them, but if there are any other electeds in attendance who are not candidates, can you let us know?
Sadia Khan here, Albany School Board, and delegate for our district or Assembly District 14.
Okay, great, thanks. All right. So the way the forum will go is we'll have 2 minutes for each candidate to give an opening statement. Then we'll have questions, the same question asked of each candidate. And the candidates will have 1 minute to respond. And then when we're done with the questions, let me check the agenda. So there is an agenda which which officers can share in the chat every once in a while. If you could keep yourself muted when you're not, if you're not a candidate. And we're going to go till around 8:45 for the forum. And so candidates will have 1 minute to respond to each question in turn. We'll start with a different candidate each time. Whoever was second in the list of candidates to answer the first question will be first in the next round of questioning, and so forth. And then they'll have 1 minute for a closing statement at the end when we wrap things up. And so that, and then also officers, if you could remind us you can send, the audience can also submit questions. And so we have a sort of a bank of questions that we have some of that we've already populated with some questions of the clubs, but we're also taking audience questions. So who's taking those and adding from the audience and adding those to the document that the officers are working on?
I'll go ahead and take care of that.
Okay, so if you can do a direct message in your chat to Gabi, our club treasurer,
or I feel like it can also just be a general question. If you want to just send it to me, you can. Otherwise, having it so everybody can see it is probably fine too.
Okay, you can make it a general open chat. That works too. And then as time allows, we'll get to those as well. And yeah. So without any?
So
Uh,
Brian, I was thinking it might be useful. I've set the timer for 15 seconds just to give the candidates a sample so they can orient themselves.
okay,
I
yeah.
don't want the first candidate to have the disadvantage of trying to figure that out while
Okay.
they're also doing their opening statement. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. And it should be visible in the corner of your screen. And so
I can
you'll
also
see-
just spotlight both. If you
Okay.
hit the
Great.
timer.
All right. So that's what it looks like. And then it'll obviously go orange and red and make a little beep. And then you'll be done. So I just want to let you know what that was going to look like. All right.
And we definitely want to make sure people can see the candidates. So make sure it's not people are not just staring at the timer, you know. Okay. All right. So we're going to go alphabetical by last name. So it's our candidates are with a brief summary of, and we can only endorse Democrats, and we only have Democrats in the race. And it's a top two. California's a top two primary state where the top two vote getters will move on to the general election. So our club will be endorsing up to two candidates. And so the first person to go, and help me out with the pronunciation. I'm embarrassed to say the last name of Jesse. Not sure. Is it
Again.
Arreguin? Thank you. Berkeley Mayor. We have Javanka Beckles, AC Transit Board Director. And then help me out, Ernesto, is it Falcone?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, Ernesto Falcone, Senior Legislative Counsel, Electronic Frontier Foundation. We have Dan Kalb, Oakland City Council member. Catherine Leinbarger, is that correct how you pronounce your name?
Liebarger.
Oh, sorry, Liebarger. Yes, there's no N in there. So, Catherine Liebarger, a union president for American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO. And I believe it's Sandre Swanson, is that correct?
That's right, Sandra, yes.
Thank you. A former assembly member. And
Yes.
please do flesh out your bios as needed when it as desired when it's your turn to kick things off. So we'll start off with Jesse, then Javanka, then Ernesto, then Dan, then Catherine, then Sandre, and I'll call each person out in turn. And then when we get to our first question, it'll be Javanka, then Ernesto, then Dan, and the next question we'll start with Ernesto, and so forth. Officers, anything I've forgotten before we begin?
I think you've covered it.
All right, hearing no objections. Jesse, you are up with your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. I'm running for state senate because the East Bay needs bold and experienced leadership to address our biggest challenges. And I'm the son and grandson of farm workers that worked in the fields of the Central Valley, and growing up in poverty and facing housing insecurity inspired me to dedicate my life to fight for economic and social justice. At the age of 10, I was marching with Dolores Huerta, who has endorsed my campaign for Senate, to name a street in San Francisco after my hero, Cesar Chavez, and I've been at it ever since. As a first-generation college student, it was the state's investment in our public education system that gave me the opportunity to achieve the California dream. And I'm running for state senate to protect and expand the California dream for future generations. I currently serve as the mayor of Berkeley, the first Latino ever elected and youngest person in a century. I'm proud to have led my city through a period of transformative change. We're building thousands of new housing units. We're promoting compassionate and effective solutions to addressing homelessness. We manage COVID-19. We're advancing bold climate action and public safety reform. I'm also the president of ABAG, our regional government, where I led the development of our regional housing plan for 440,000 new homes in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm working to put a $20 billion housing bond on the regional ballot next year. As a renter and as a millennial, I also understand from a firsthand perspective the challenges facing renters and young people in the Bay Area and the state. My priorities, if elected, we need to build housing now and strengthen tenant protections. We need to address homelessness as a moral crisis that it is. I want to advance smart, progressive solutions to addressing our public safety crisis. I will fight for universal single-payer healthcare and a full-service hospital for West Contra Costa County and Northern Alameda County. And I will fight for transit justice and climate justice. I believe that our government can be a positive force for change. I want to bring my lived and professional experience, my knowledge of the issues, and my deeply rooted progressive values to make positive change for the region and the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for the 2-minute opening statement is Javanka Beckles.
Good evening, Democrats. I'm here to ask for your endorsement because I believe our values are in line. You value justice, environmental, economic, social, and racial justice and equity for all. I have a lot to say because I've done a lot as a rank and file Teamster, working as a mental health provider for 34 years, doing a wraparound service as a Black, Latina, queer, immigrant woman living at the intersection of many marginalized communities. I've improved the quality of life for East Bay residents, like banned the box for formerly incarcerated folks, raised the minimum wage for workers, wrote and passed the first rent control policy in California in over 30 years, made Richmond a sanctuary city, built the most affordable housing among the candidates, reduced crime significantly by addressing the root causes of crime and poverty. I help keep kids out of the school to prison pipeline. I restore bus services, to name just a few. But maybe you don't care about that. Maybe viability is important to you. Well, I'm the most viable, right? I have earned the most votes of all the candidates in recent elections. But maybe that's not important. Maybe knowing that the East Bay has not had a Black woman representing us in 30 years, if that's not important. Because of course, of the 40 senators, there are only 2 Black senators in the entire state. Well, maybe that's not important. Maybe money is more important to you. If money is more important to you, then I'm not your candidate. Because true grassroots corporate-free candidates will never raise the most money. I am the grassroots corporate money-free candidate who gets things done and has the trust of the community. That's why I'll win, because a true measure of what a candidate will do is what they have already done. The community trusts me to fight for free healthcare, childcare, preschool, college, to tax the rich, as I've done with Chevron, to fund public transit and a full service hospital in West County, and to transition away from fossil fuel and more. As Democrats, we need people to vote. When they see a candidate that looks like the majority of us, they will be excited to go to the polls. I ask for your support in giving us a seat at the table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up for their 2-minute opening statement is Ernesto Falcon.
Thank you. So California is struggling right now, and we need structural reforms in how we live in this state. People deserve cheaper housing with great schools and safer communities. But right now, all those things are out of reach for far too many of our residents. I decided to join this race because I was worried about the future for my home state. I worry about my kids' ability to obtain the California dream of home ownership. I worry about the fact that low-income Black and Latino children are at their worst academic performance in years in our district, and that Sacramento is not treating that as the emergency it truly is. I worry that gut crime is gutting our businesses and forcing longtime residents to abandon our community. That said, I believe we can fix these things. I offer a fresh perspective and a recalibration of how we govern and how we legislate. I am the most qualified to move structural reforms in Sacramento because that's what I did for a living. I've worked in the legislative space as a staffer and advocate for 20 years, with my most recent work being at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where I wrote laws with legislators and enacted systemic reforms. My most recent work includes charting the end of the digital divide in California by designing our state's $7 billion broadband infrastructure law with Governor Newsom's team and the legislature. And I'm proud of my work with Democratic leadership in Congress on President Biden's signature bipartisan infrastructure law that mirrors the work I did here in California. Our housing, education, and public safety, my expertise and experience in tackling complex systemic problems and solving them will guide my work. I've never given up when facing tough odds. I've seen my way to solutions by building coalitions, providing expert analysis, relentless advocacy, and optimism. If endorsed, know that I would champion the restoration of opportunity in our state, and I've already have several proposals on my website to get us there. I believe our best days are ahead of us, but we have a lot of work to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for their 2-minute opening statement is Dan Kalb.
Oops. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. My name is Dan Kolb. I'm in my third term as an Oakland City Council member with a strong record of significant accomplishments. Virtually my entire professional career has been that of engaging as a public interest, social justice, and environmental advocate. I've been a determined policy reformer for over 30 years, including 10 years commuting to Sacramento, crafting state legislation, building coalitions, and engaging in the entire soup to nuts legislative process on complex policy. In fact, I know that being a state legislator is not a high-profile position, and being an effective state legislator is not about press releases and merely talking the talk. The real work is the intricate, often behind-the-scenes, tedious work on complex policy matters, and that's the kind of work that I'm very good at. If you look at my work on the Oakland City Council and my work previously as an environmental, clean energy, and climate justice advocate with the Union of Concerned Scientists and the Sierra Club, you know that I engage in details because details matter and that I'm someone who gets the job done. I'm not merely a good vote, but a strong leader on affordable housing, protections for renters, police accountability, environmental justice, gun violence prevention, public schools and public libraries, walkable neighborhoods, and so much more. I'm proud to have been named an affordable housing champion by East Bay Housing Organizations just a few years ago. I will be a leader on affordable housing, environmental, climate justice, and clean energy issues, supporting our children in public schools, reducing gun violence, reforming Prop 13, supporting mass transit, and fighting for clean money elections, as I've done so many times. In fact, how do you know I'll do these vital things? Because I've done it so many times before. I've been endorsed by Mayor Shang Tao and roughly 70 current and former elected officials, including a dozen former state legislators who know what it takes to get the job done in Sacramento and know that I will do a great job repping this district. Check out dankolb.net for more info. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up for the 2-minute opening statement is Catherine Leibarger.
Good evening, Democrats. My name is Catherine Leibarger. My wife and I moved to Berkeley 23 years ago to start a family. We have 2 kids who are now grown. I've done physical work my whole life, took time out to earn a degree in sculpture, and I am a groundskeeper by profession. I now work full-time, leading a union of 30,000 people, predominantly women of color. We feed students, clean hospital rooms. They get home in time to watch the kids while their partner heads off to work, all of which keeps me grounded in what's practical. I understand the forces at work in our society that cause people to fall behind, and I know what it takes to change that. Together, the people I work with have trusted each other and taken collective risks to protect our paychecks, healthcare, and our jobs, and won historic contracts at the 3rd largest employer in the state to grow our families and our communities. I'm working right now to place on the ballot a measure that would extend equal pay to all California women. I'm also working right now to expand first-time home ownership to low-wage workers at the University of California. And I'll be working to remove the ban on marriage equality from California's Constitution. In the state Senate, I'll make sure working families can live closer to where they work by raising wages and building affordable housing with strong labor standards. I'll expand the right to organize and unionize. I'll be a champion for single payer, and I'll fund education so that young Californians can choose college or good work in the trades or other well-paying unionized careers. These are the things that make for safe and thriving neighborhoods. I lead a federation of 2.1 million working people, and I'm honored to have the support of a diverse and remarkable community. Nurses, teachers, farm workers, domestic workers are among the many who want to see me in the state Senate, and I'd be honored to have your support as well. Thanks for your consideration.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, we have for their 2-minute opening statement, Sondre Swanson.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was born in Oakland, California, which is the largest city in the Senate district. I worked in the Senate district all my life. I was honored to represent Oakland, Alameda, and Piedmont in the state assembly for 3 terms. I'm the only former state legislator in this race. I think experience should matter. I'm a problem solver and a lawmaker. I was chief of staff to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, district director to Congressman Ron Dellums, deputy mayor to Mayor Jean Quan. I was chair of the Assembly Labor and Employment Committee with 100% voting record. I was a champion for working families in the state legislature. I chaired the Men and Boys Select Committee and traveled the state trying to find out how we solve problems for young men. I led the assembly in legislation, rescuing young victims of human trafficking. And now in this election, I feel that we need to have full service schools. I have also talked about crime. Crime is sort of out of control, particularly in the city of Oakland. And I think that we have to get it under control so people will not only feel safe, but be safe. And our children will be safe as they leave their homes. I think homelessness is a crisis. We need humanitarian solutions, and I'd like to work on that with a coalition of legislators. I think education should be our top priority in the state of California. We need to be in the top 10 percentile in education in the nation, and we're not. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And so next we'll enter a question and answer phase where a question will be posed and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. And we are taking questions from the audience as well, which can go in the chat, and the club has also put some together. So the first question for candidates, and it will go, the person who was second will go first, which is Javanka, then Ernesto, then Dan, then Catherine, then Sandre, ending with Jesse, who went first the last time there. And so the first question for you all is, how will your policies be similar or different from Nancy Skinner's, who's term limited out? And so we start with Javanka with 1 minute.
Nancy and I, our values are right in line. The very things that I campaigned on a regional level in 2018, the things I campaigned on in 2020, the things I campaigned on as a two-term Richmond City Council are the very things that Nancy Skinner took up. Nancy is fighting for our planet. I intend to do that. And as a corporate free candidate, you know that I will. I'm not afraid to stand up to corporate polluters. I tax them, use that money to provide scholarships for our students. Nancy also took up the reign when it comes to criminal justice reform, and I have done that. Again, these are not things I'm saying, oh yes, I plan to do it, especially now because I'm running for office. No, these are things that I've done, that I did in Richmond. I encourage you all to Google me and you'll see what I've done to bring about criminal justice reform, as well as all of the other policies that Nancy's taken up as a progressive candidate and a progressive senator.
Thank you. Next up, Ernesto.
Thank you for that question. I have an awful lot of overlap with Senator Skinner on how she views criminal justice reform. But I think the challenges and the things that will be different because the issues are new to the district that will exceed her term. For example, we have an enormous amount of work to help low-income Black and Latino kids catch up on their reading and math literacy following the pandemic. We have a daycare crisis where the number of daycare facilities that are raising prices or closing is skyrocketing right now. That requires this next legislature to really come together and produce a comprehensive age 0 to 4 universal childcare coverage, which I wrote on my website of what I would like to do. I also think we need to deal with the structural barriers on housing. I am the candidate that is speaking towards reforms of CEQA that is getting in the way of affordable housing, because I believe if we don't eliminate the weaponization of courts against construction of homes, particularly low-income homes in high-income neighborhoods, we're never going to really actually get across the finish line to delivering affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Dan.
We go. Thanks for the question. Interestingly, Nancy and I went through the same undergraduate program at Cal, Conservation of Natural Resources. We both have an academic background on environmental issues. And prior to her being an elected official in Sacramento and prior to me being elected official in Oakland, we were both climate and environmental advocates. We have a very similar background in our professionally, academically, and legislatively. In fact, I, like Nancy, will be a leader when it comes to environmental issues, climate justice, and clean energy issues. And if you look at the number of legislators today who have a deep, longstanding expertise or professional background in environmental sustainability, climate justice, clean energy, water issues, you could count those legislators today on one hand and still have fingers left over. And Nancy is one of them, and we're losing her to term limits. I'm the person among all good people who could follow in her footsteps and be that environmental leader. I also have a strong record on police reform, as Nancy has, and on helping feed the hungry, and on the budget. My top priority committee is to be on the budget committee, and that's where a lot of decisions are made, and I will be a strong person and strong advocate for the district on the budget committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Catherine.
The thing I admire most about, one of the things I admire most about Nancy Skinner's record is that she embodies both bold work, smart work, and really practical. So for example, she's stayed focused on climate, and that shows up in different ways, managing to get funding for Point Mulati. As she looks to housing, she focus on very practical solutions to ensure we're expanding housing while also maintaining guardrails to make sure that we're doing it sensibly and with climate in mind. Criminal justice she's been a champion on that, really focused on restorative justice and done an incredible amount of work in that area. And when it comes to labor, she's been a very strong labor ally, 100%er. Of course, I come out of labor. I would absolutely go the same route of doing very practical, smart, and yet far-reaching changes that move the ball down the court for everyone.
Thank you. Next up is Sandre.
Thank you. I think Nancy has been an excellent senator. I invite you to go to my website, sandreswanson.net, and look at all the laws that I have written that are on the books and judge for yourself how similar our records are. Each legislator has the freedom to develop their agenda. If elected, I would choose to address the question of crime because that's the crisis that many people in this district are facing now that we have to find solutions to. I would focus in on homelessness and humanitarian solutions to homelessness. I was one of the few legislators during the recession to fight to keep redevelopment funds that was used for affordable housing and to give the homeless some relief. I would ask for the legislature to restore those funds. And those would be my focuses, similar to Nancy's work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, for this question, we have Jesse.
Well, Senator Skinner has been an amazing champion for so many progressive causes, and honestly, they're big shoes to fill, and I don't think any of us will ever be able to fill them. But I think what distinguishes me is my lived experience as somebody who grew up in poverty, faced housing insecurity and displacement, as the first Latino mayor of the city of Berkeley, as a millennial, as a renter. I bring that perspective to the work that I do. As somebody who served in elected office for 18 years, similarly, Senator Skinner got her start on the Berkeley City Council, just like myself. But we're very aligned in terms of housing, building more housing, addressing homelessness, criminal justice reform, reforming our prison system. But I think the one thing that really distinguishes her is she leads with her values, but she's also a practical progressive. She's not just taking ideological positions, but she's actually getting things done and delivering for her constituents. We need a savvy, experienced legislator. My track record in Berkeley and at the regional level shows that I will listen, I will build coalitions, and I will get things done. And that's the approach that I will bring to Sacramento.
Okay, thank you. For the next round, by the way, if I screw up on who's going next, please let me know immediately, because it's really easy to do. And I want to, rectify that as soon as possible. The next question is a little long-winded, but if you'll bear with me, the owners of Golden Gate Fields have announced that they will cease operations June 2024. The head of a state racing organization has said that Golden Gate Fields is in talks to sell its 140 acres in Albany and Berkeley to the state of California, but there's been no verification of that, and any public-private combination is in principle possible. It appears that if the state or some other tax-exempt entity like the East Bay Regional Parks or others purchases it, that the city of Albany and its school district would lose a substantial amount of money from its tax base. What role do you see playing in the interface between state, regional, and multiple municipal jurisdictions for decision-making for this waterfront property? And the first person to respond is Ernesto. You have 1 minute.
So I think the fundamental priorities, we need a lot more housing supply to address where the cost of living has gone here, right? So I think we have to keep our eye on the fundamental objective. I think a tension that you identified is the nonprofit entities and the tax status and the local revenues. The challenge is that is also the way we are going to deliver the most affordable housing is through entities like nonprofit developers, who are the ones that are most equipped through their cost models to deliver below market rate rentals, which we desperately need. And so I think we're going to have to come up with a means of utilizing state resources to help offset any types of losses the local community would have, particularly for the school districts. But I also think my proposal about how do we promote more construction, more ownership will rectify a lot of the revenue challenges for local schools, because the more owners, the more local property taxes we can generate, the more we're able to have flexibility to allow below market rate nonprofit developed areas in that new region.
Thank you. Next up is Dan.
Thanks for that timely question. Appreciate it. I think the likely outcome, I think, of the disposition of that property eventually is some combination of parkland and open space on the portions that are closer to the water, and then some type of housing, including affordable housing, on the portions closer to the freeway. The exact division, the exact number, no one knows. No one knows right now. No one can even guess right now. But it's going to be some combination of those things. The state can help through its budget process in helping with whatever transition is needed to make sure we can actually do both those things in a way that meets the needs of the community and the community will support. You're not going to get 100% support anytime about anything, but you need to have a public process that engages the community and finds a good combination of things that could actually get that broad support. I will help facilitate that. I will respect the folks at the local level who will be leading that effort, but I want to help facilitate that and provide money through as a part of a transition through the state budget.
Okay,
thank you. Next up is Catherine.
Albany is the picture of a thriving community, and Albany is doing something right. It's not a small thing that an employer that employed 200 people will be eventually losing the area, and so we have to take it seriously. In the process of figuring out what happens with that space, of course, the people of Albany have to be at the heart of that engagement. Thinking broadly about the options, the racetrack was built on landfill, and as we look at oceans rising, we have to potentially look at that space as a site of environmental resilience, right? So I could see open space and that actually really being a buffer for the community of Albany, while also offering some space, I think perhaps for a little bit of commerce to replace what we lose when the track goes away.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Sandre.
When the military decided to leave Alameda, the base represented about a third of the island, and so the impact on the schools and the discussion about what we would do for mixed use became very important. What I've learned from that experience is that the people in Albany need to lead the discussion. They need to be asked what their preference is, because they have made an investment in this community, and it should be respected. I think that it's easy for us to talk about housing, and obviously we need affordable housing, and we also need to look at the question of open space and recreation. But I think that discussion needs to be led by the local people, and that's what I would support, bringing whatever state aid to that, to those decisions, to make them actually happen.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Jesse.
Well, as the mayor of your neighboring city of Berkeley, I'm actually very excited by this opportunity and in conversation with your mayor, Aaron Tiedemann, who's endorsed my campaign for state senate already, about us working together. Berkeley and Albany have to work together for the master planning of that site. There's a portion of it that's actually in the city of Berkeley's jurisdiction. 2/3 of it is in Albany's jurisdiction. And we do need to bring BCDC, we need to bring the state, East Bay Regional Parks, all to the table, and the community to talk about what the vision is for that site. And yes, I think a substantial portion of it can be and should be for open space. And I know that's something the environmental community has advocated for over the years, but there is a component that could be for housing or some other type of use, but that use needs to be determined through a community process. We also need to amend the general plans, and that's going on the ballot in Albany as well. So we need to initiate that community process. The community's voice and needs to drive those decisions. And at the state level, I think I'd be best positioned to help broker some of the conversations and to provide resources to make the project a reality.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, for this question, Jamanka.
You know, I believe in community voice and choice. I believe it's important that we have, that there be ownership with the community. I say this often. I don't profess to have all the answers, but I believe that the community does, and the community needs to lead this effort. You know, as and I, as an elected official, a public servant, then need to be able to listen. You know, it's what we did in Richmond when we had the Point Malati. It was a big fight. But the progressives on the council, including myself, we led community voice and choice, and the community got to say what they wanted. Now, the mayor, Tom, housing. Yes, we need housing, absolutely. And he, you know, and because this was, you know, he felt, you know, he had all the answers, wanted that at the expense of what the community wanted. And it turned out the community wanted open space. But in everything that we did in Richmond, with all of these spaces that became available, Point Malati for one, the Zeneca site, there has to be a community benefits agreement to whatever you know, we decide that the community decides to do. And I believe the community has the answer. They should lead on this, and we listen.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, we will begin with Dan. And the question is, what are your priorities to address issues related to crime?
Thanks for the question. Appreciate that. You know, a few years ago, I took a tour of San Quentin Prison. I met with more than 40 inmates, 2 of the NGOs running rehabilitation programs there, the warden, and I've done a lot of research over many years when it comes to reducing crime. It's not easy. But as far as the state level is concerned, the state has to invest heavily in rehabilitation in our state prisons and reentry services at the local and county and local level. If we don't do that, we will never reduce recidivism, and we'll never get a handle on crime overall. We need prevention, intervention, and some real enforcement as well. So you need all 3 of those. You need a comprehensive approach. And everybody I've ever talked to, whether academics, activists, or police, they all say you need a comprehensive approach, and they're right. So I will make sure that we increase our funding substantially for rehabilitation in our state prisons, which will reduce recidivism and help people who need help the most. And we will do a better job in funding reentry services and programs. In fact, I had a probation reentry person at my last town hall meeting on crime. And so that will be my focus, among other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Catherine.
Yeah, we've got to look at the things that actually reduce crime. And, you know, this has to be I think we have to hold ourselves to looking at the data on that one. And so far, what we know, what the data show, is that investing in housing, healthcare, jobs, education, after school programs, environmental design, violence interruption programs, these are the things that actually reduce crime. There was a study that showed that for every nonprofit per 10,000 residents in a community that's focused on violence reduction and building stronger communities, yields an estimated 9% reduction in the murder rate, a 6% reduction in violent crime rate, and a 4% reduction in the property crime rate. And so I think that we've got to be led by these understandings, and then we've got to resource all of our safety personnel to meet that. That includes police for what they do, mental health, and healthcare workers, teachers, etc.
Thank you. Next up, Sandri.
Thank you very much. Today, there is a crime wave that's taking place in the largest city in this Senate district. People are afraid to walk home from shopping. They're being assaulted. We've had businesses that are closing because the crime rate is so high that they can't do business. We need to make sure that our police force is well equipped and personnel is adequate to respond to what I believe is an organized effort. We also have to look at some of the laws that are allowing people to go into clothing stores and take what they want and then not suffer consequences. I think that's unacceptable. And I think that we need to make sure that we have successful rehabilitation, of course, but those that are pulling guns on people need to be arrested. And people don't need to be living in fear. And that's what I would make sure happens.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Jesse.
Well, the public safety crisis in the East Bay is deeply concerning to all of us, and we need to focus on prevention, deterrence, and accountability. And I'll start first with accountability. We need to hold people that commit serious crimes accountable. We need to deal with organized crime and work regionally to address that and make sure the state provides grants to help support hiring more police, investing in technology to assist in crime investigation and deterrence. And we also need to invest in non-armed responders, people who respond to mental health calls and other types of low-level calls for service. We need to focus on prevention. We need to make upstream investments in fully funding our schools, making sure we create job opportunities, making sure that we can give kids a better path forward. And we also need to focus on fixing our carceral system, the one that's focused on rehabilitation, jobs, housing opportunities. I introduced legislation in Berkeley to ban the box so that people that were previously incarcerated can actually access housing. And we need to also make sure that we are advancing a more comprehensive, holistic vision for public safety.
Thank you. Next up, Javanka.
My priorities are the same that worked in Richmond. Richmond is no longer on the nation's most violent cities. Why is that? We reduced crime when I was on the Richmond City Council, not by hiring more police, but by addressing the root causes of crime. We funded community organization, grassroots efforts like the Office of Neighborhood Safety, like the first policy that I wrote and passed when I was on this council was to ban the box, because we understand that in order for people to not reoffend, they have to have opportunities. So Richmond was the first city in California to ban the box. I brought that forward. We funded reentry programs. We reimagined what public safety looked like. We renovated our parks. We kept people in their homes by passing rent control, helping them by raising the minimum wage. We partnered with county mental health officials. So it's about addressing the root causes of crime and funding those policies.
Okay, thank you. And lastly on this question, Ernesto.
Thank you for that. I agree on the emphasis on reentry. I actually worked on reducing the cost for inmates to speak with families in my previous work because giving them opportunity and connection to community is necessary and part of public safety. We have to give them a reason not to for recidivism. But fundamentally, I think we have to focus on stopping the doom loop. We have organized crime that's on the rise. We have businesses and families that are leaving, and we have revenues declining in the East Bay, particularly in Oakland. It's not going to stop in Oakland unless we can make it stop there. Fundamentally, that means we need to hire more police. Overtime hours are a clear indication of systemic understaffing. If you look at other cities that are Democratic strongholds as well, the police population there and the number of officers they serve, we are the outlier, and we're paying the price for that. There's an objective way to look at this. I think we need to be dispassionate about how we analyze our resources of personnel and uniforms on patrol, because if we ignore the math, the problem will only get worse and it'll only spread as a contagion.
Okay, thank you. Next to answer the next question, the first person to answer the next question will be Catherine Liebarger. And the question is from our audience, says, being specific, what measures will you take to address our climate crisis / global warming?
So I think that the solutions that we have are there. Absolutely. We've got the science, and actually we have the people to be able to do it. Where we move too slowly, I think, is honestly where we've got to hold fossil fuel producers accountable for a slow transition. I think that it isn't workers who want to see the planet burn up, but we do need to make sure that all those people who work in energy production, but has been fossil fuel production, have good family sustaining jobs. And we need to focus on making sure that as we transition to a green economy, that those jobs also are family sustaining, unionized, and community building. I think when we do that, we will enlist even more ranks of people who are able to participate in the transition to a green economy. That, and we've got to broaden it out to measures that help working people be able to participate as well.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Sandre Swanson.
Well, I think California should be a leader in a world leader in the argument for taking care of our environment. As a representative, I think it's important for us to also address those things that are happening in our district. When I was chair of the Assembly Labor Committee, I held hearings in our ports in the state, and particularly the Port of Oakland. With the trucks idling and the ships, the neighboring communities suffer from asthma because of the emissions, and I think that we have to address that question. We also have this crisis in the homeless community, and that is an environmental hazard. I mean, we have waste, we have filth. And I think that people live in this environment and they want to make sure that it's cleaned up. And so we have to pay attention to what impacts a local community, like dumping, et cetera. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Jesse Aragoon.
Well, we need to move faster to achieve net zero in the state of California, and that's going to require bold leadership. And we're seeing the effects of the climate emergency now with catastrophic wildfires, warmer temperatures, rising sea levels. That particularly impacts the city of Albany along the San Francisco Bay. We need to adapt to the reality of climate change, and that includes investing in gray and green infrastructure to make sure we can adapt to the threat of rising sea levels. But that also means that we have to end fossil fuel extraction in California. And I want to advance a Green New Deal for the state of California. And what that means is really doubling down on our commitment towards transitioning to zero emissions, electrifying our buildings and our transportation sector, making sure we can fund mass transit to keep the buses and trains running, because that's a critical part of reducing emissions, and to create good jobs. I think we can have a win-win of not just making the investment to expand our electrification infrastructure in the state, but actually provide a transition for those people that are working in the fossil fuel industry.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Javanka Beckles.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, we have to hold corporate polluters accountable, and who better to hold corporate polluters accountable than someone who already has been doing that, someone who is the only corporate-free candidate in this race, someone who's actually held Chevron to the fire, taxed, sued, beat them. We have to transition away from this extractive fossil fuel industry, train the workers in that industry into this green new economy. As I stated from the beginning of this race, is that I will push for a Green New Deal. As the current AC Transit director, my leadership has enabled AC Transit to win the best transit district in North America. And the reason for that is our transitioning away from diesel fuel into our zero emission buses. And then, of course, we have to fund public transit. Get people out.
All right, thank you. Next up, Ernesto Falcon.
Thank you. I think fundamentally reducing our CO2 emissions comes from our number one contribution as the East Bay, which is our traffic jam and the CO2 from cars. That means we have to stabilize BART. We have to decouple the fact that transit ticket sales is how mostly it's financed. We need to bring public money to finance BART because it is going to be a necessary component for people to move in a zero emission way. We have to build homes nearer and closer where people work by removing the barriers to construction. We should also have at the state level at Caltrans, someone focus on more than just on cars and roads. We don't have anyone in state leadership that's in charge of our bike infrastructure to coordinate with cities. And I think electric bikes and bike transit is a means of giving people the direct capacity to do their own, to contribute their fight against climate change. And fundamentally, I think at from a statewide project, we've got to get high-speed rail done as a global economy. We're the only massive economy in this world that doesn't have high-speed rail of that level.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, on this question, Dan Kalb.
Thanks for the question. As many of you know, I used to work for the Union of Concerned Scientists as their state policy director here. So I worked on these very issues for many, many years, and I will be a leader in Sacramento. When it comes to addressing climate change, we obviously have to increase our investment in renewables, and we need to support, not attack, our solar and wind industry in California. That's absolutely critical. We need to electrify virtually all of our transportation system and invest in the infrastructure that allows us to do that and creates public acceptance. 3, we have to make sure that new buildings are all electric and eventually over time transition older buildings to be all electric because that reduces fossil fuel use. But critically important though is reducing VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Right? We need to make sure we build housing, including affordable housing in transit hubs and where people are actually working. We need to make sure we have mobility options. We need to make sure that we do our planning in a way that says, okay, we're going to reduce VMT and reduce and have cleaner cars, not just one or the other, but we need to do both. I was a leader in banning coal exports in Oakland, and I'll be a leader on these issues once we get to Sacramento. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we'll start with Sandre. And that question is from our audience. What is a realistic approach to addressing the lack of an emergency department in the area when Alta Bates closes?
Well,
Sandre.
Yeah, well, I campaign with nurses to keep hospitals open. I think our healthcare system has resource problems. I don't, and I believe that healthcare is a right, and I think the state needs to invest more into assisting so these hospitals that are facing these kind of problems receive that assistance in enough time to actually save their existence. And so I'm a big believer in a national health system. Frankly, I believe that our country is far behind in providing healthcare services, and I think our nation needs to catch up with all the other industrialized world and make sure that healthcare is a right for everyone, and that we have a national health system that will allow for these kind of situations not to develop. That would take us continuing to push. It's going to take all of our effort to make sure that people see healthcare as a right and not something that needs to be sold for profit.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Jesse Aragun.
Well, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, not enough people know that Alta Bates is slated to close by the year 2030. And as the mayor of Berkeley, where Alta Bates is located, this issue is not just important to my constituents, the University of California, but the entire East Bay, because this is going to impact Albany, El Cerrito, Richmond. With the closure of Doctors Hospital, it's going to create a healthcare desert. That's why I've led the fight for the past 7 years, helping bring regional leaders together, including representatives of Albany, as part of a regional task force to look at the impacts of closure and to look at alternatives. And I'm committed to fight to keep Alta Bates open. And in the legislature, I will introduce legislation to provide more oversight and control over the closures of hospitals. This just doesn't impact East Bay. It impacts hospitals throughout the state of California. And I will use every legal and financial tool possible to make sure that our region has a full service hospital. And I'm in conversation with other healthcare providers to make sure that if Alta Bates closes, we're not going to leave our region without a full service hospital. So I have been a leader in the fight to save Alta Bates. I will continue to fight as your state representative and work in partnership with all of you to make this happen.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Javanka Beckles.
You know, the question is, what realistic approach for addressing a lack of hospital? I've been in this fight for a full service hospital in West County for years. In fact, since my tenure on the Richmond City Council, I have been a part of organizations, particularly grassroots organizations, fighting to keep Alta Bates from closing. I've personally seen the effects of people who have died because we do not have a full service hospital. You know, the reason for that is, you know, our for-profit healthcare system sucks, and that's why we need we need full service. We need Medicare for all. We need a free health system that isn't solely dependent on profits. And when we do that, I believe we can have the political will to fund hospitals in our area.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Ernesto Falcon.
Thank you for that question. I would work with the hospitals directly to address the cost barriers. The underlying issue there is the regulations that the state has put out on seismic preparedness. And some hospitals have serious cost barriers that are not fictitious as to whether they can comply or would have to close. I'd be willing to introduce legislation to provide them the flexibility they need to maintain them open as the priority, while working through the nitty-gritty details of what their financial cost model is to eventually update their building code to maintain compliance with the regulation. But it is completely driven by what our rules are and this tension between what we need in terms of public safety, in terms of seismic regulation. It is something that I think we are approaching with a little bit too much of a categorical viewpoint without a recognition that some hospitals cannot make things happen without the requisite resources, either provided by the state or the fact that they lack the resources to comply with the rules at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Dan Kalb.
Thanks for the question. I'm very familiar with the situation with Sutter Alta Bates, and I was very familiar with the situation at Doctors Hospital. My mother used to live in San Pablo for over 9 years, going to Doctors Hospital regularly before she passed away. So I was part of that fight from a very personal level at Doctors Hospital. We won a couple of times, and then, of course, ultimately it lost, and it was a big problem, still a big problem. We must protect Alta Bates the best we can, and they have had many years to get ready for this transition. And unfortunately, Sutter is not interested in a transition. They're not interested in keeping it open. They want to grow their Oakland hospital. And I've said to them, listen, you're not getting any help from me. We're going to actually make it tougher for you to expand in Oakland because we need to keep the Berkeley Alta-Bates Hospital in place. So I will continue to be a strong advocate in this regard. I will also say at this point in time that I am a strong, passionate advocate for the past 35 years for single-payer health care, as we now call Medicare for all. And I believe that mental health care needs to be considered health care, just like any other type of health care. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Catherine Leiberger.
So it is real that Alta-Bates sits on a fault line, and there are seismic issues to be addressed. But I think the larger thing to address is actually hospital profit. When you have a nonprofit that doesn't have the same tax burden as a for-profit hospital, they ought to be held to a higher standard. And I think that the state, as Nancy Skinner has attempted, and other agencies have weighed in, should hold Sutter to a higher standard and insist that they either invest in Alta-Bates or that they sell to a provider that will actually provide the necessary emergency care that we need geographically. It's not realistic to have that long stretch of no acute care, emergency care. The state absolutely can insist that there is much more oversight when a major hospital chain makes a decision like this.
Thank you. All right. And the next question will be started by Jesse Aragin, and the question is, what are your priorities to address issues related to housing that balance the interests of current residents and labor interests?
Well, I believe very strongly that we need to build housing for people at all income levels. That includes entry-level ownership opportunities. I'm excited the state just adopted legislation that will allow for the subdivision of ADUs to create entry-level ownership opportunities. And as all the candidates here, I have the strongest track record of leadership on building housing. Berkeley has permitted 7,000 new housing units during my time in office. And we've also, through our housing bond, been able to finance 1,000 deed-restricted permanent affordable units. I'm also working to secure 10 to 20 billion at the regional level as my role as president of the Association of Area Governments to build affordable homes. And I want to go to Sacramento to not just continue efforts to streamline production, but make sure we have strong affordable housing requirements and labor standards, but also to make sure we can get the money to build and preserve affordable housing here in the East Bay. We need stronger partnerships between the state government and local government. And we also I think we need local government officials who have the experience of doing zoning amendments and approving homes to help consider and develop state land use regulation.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Javanka Beckles.
Well, we have to think outside of the box, right? Continuing to. Huh?
People, please mute if you're not talking.
Okay. Yeah. And so, we have to think outside the box. That's why I support TOPA. I support ownership opportunities for tenants. That's why all of these tenant grassroots organizations have endorsed my candidacy, because they understand that we can't continue going in the same direction. We have to redefine what affordable means. Affordable in California means you earn $75,000 to $100,000. That's not affordable for the majority of people. Most people don't. If you make that kind of money, you can absolutely afford market rate housing. We also have to, when I say think outside the box, we have to make it easier for homeowners to be able to build ADUs.
Okay. Thank you. Next up, Ernesto Falcon.
Thank you. It is an absolute priority for me that all emphasis in the legislative space is on building more housing. Our homelessness population is extreme. Our cost of living is extreme. We are the most expensive place in the entire country, the Bay Area region, And that was from a failure of structural reforms necessary to build housing at the same pace the rest of the country does. So I'm, for one, am tired of hearing candidates run on solving the housing crisis, because that's been happening as far as back I can remember at this point, and we're worse off now than we've ever been. Every homeowner I've talked to is priced out of their homes. And that has caused an enormous amount of stagnation where people can no longer move or migrate within our community, or they leave California outright. There's a reason why our population is in stagnation for the next 30 years based on state government estimates. So if you ask me, how do I choose the balance between building more homes and any democratic interests, I will always side with building more homes. We need to have a tremendous focus to catch up our supply, or costs, and the future will not be benefited.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Dan Kalb.
Thanks for the question. Clearly, we need more housing at a range of income levels, but that the biggest gap is below market housing. Moderate, low, very low, extremely low. That's where the biggest gap is. Yeah, we need more market rate housing too, and that's fine. I've been supporting all sorts of developments in Oakland and beyond, but we need extra emphasis on below market housing, and that's the biggest need. I'll be a champion for that. And like I said before, EBHO gave me one of their Affordable Housing Champion Awards, and I really believe I've earned it both for building new affordable housing and protecting renters from displacement. I will continue to be a leader in Sacramento, as I have been in Oakland, in protecting renters from displacement and being a strong advocate for strong statewide reforms to our renter protection laws. I support community land trusts, social housing, and I also want to make sure that some of the housing that is built, some of the new housing that is built, is for family size housing. Too many developers want to have small units in almost their entire building. We need family size housing, because if you look through at the housing issue through a climate lens, we want to make sure that people, once they have some children and have a larger family, that they stay local and don't go out to the suburbs and have long commutes. Family size housing, affordable housing, okay. We need it all.
Thank you. Next up, we have Catherine Liebarger.
Yeah, the homelessness that California is seeing now is rooted in decades and decades of underinvestment in affordable housing. So I think that we have to go at that directly. $8.1 billion spent over every year for 12 years will actually start to really make a massive difference in housing everybody. That amounts to about 2.7% of the state budget every year. That's less expensive than what it costs to take care of someone who is unhoused at $45,000 a year conservatively. So number one, invest. Two, we've got to plan our cities. We need neighborhoods that actually are neighborhoods we want to live in, that are walkable and safe. So let's, as we build from sort of an outcomes perspective. Third, we can streamline production while preserving the protections that our environment and our communities need. And we can also do that ensuring strong labor standards for all the building that we do. That way we build strong communities, not just more houses.
Okay, and the last person for this question is Sandre Swanson.
Thank you. I was in the legislature when they made one of the biggest political policy blunders, of the decade. They ended redevelopment funding, and redevelopment was being used to help build affordable housing. It was used to help house the homeless, to help first-time homeowners receive down payments. And it helps cities like Oakland and Richmond and Berkeley be able to address these questions of homelessness. There was a promise made in the legislature at that time. I was one of the few progressive voices that cautioned my colleagues and the governor about eliminating these monies, but there was a promise made that we would restore those funds. And so I'm interested in going to the Senate and make the argument that the legislature in California needs to restore those monies so that we can have the local assistance for affordable housing and to help the homeless.
Okay, thank you. We've run out of time for questions, and thank you to the audience for submitting questions that we've been able to ask, and for the candidates for thoughtfully answering what they can of all the questions. What we have now is a 1-minute closing statement from each candidate, and the next person to start first will be Javanka Beckles, who will have 1 minute for her closing statement. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Democrats. I just want to remind you, I get things done. I deliver results for us. I'm not telling you what I plan to do or what I just started doing. I'm telling you what I've already done for years for the poor, working class, seniors, children, and the planet. I'm the most viable in this race with 45,000 votes for my AC Transit race and over 90,000 votes in 2018. I take no corporate money, so I'm beholden only to you, the voters. I am everything the Democratic says it stands for: diversity, equity, justice. You can trust me to do exactly what I say I will do. I have receipts in the form of a voting record. Without a voting record to back up what I say I'll do, how can you trust me? How can you trust anyone who simply says the right thing? I'm endorsed by Our Revolution, East Bay DSA, Black Women Organized Political Action, the RPA, Renters Council, the Berkeley Tennis Unions, Teamsters, and the Public Transit Union. All of these organizations trust me because they know that I'm going to fight for them. We need a fearless champion for the people in these times who always put people over profit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for the 1 minute closing statement is Ernesto Falcon.
Thank you. We deserve a state where everyone has a pathway to ownership, where everyone has a safe community and kids have access to great schools. Politics as usual has denied us all three of these things and has taken away the people's power over their own lives. I'm running to give them power back. For the retiree who's trying to convince their children to live closer to home, but they can't afford it, or that new parent who is waiting on 10 different daycare lists right now, or the teacher that's stretching their paycheck further each month because costs continue to rise, or the police officer that is working unreasonable overtime hours to make up for staffing shortages while not receiving support from their political leadership. I'm ready to change these things and give everyone more power. I believe it's possible to restore opportunity in this state in a way that we all deserve so that we can look positively and hopeful towards the future together. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all tonight.
Okay, thank you. Next up for the 1 minute closing statement, Dan Kolb.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work that you're all doing as Democratic Party activists and political activists and engaged locally. When advocates wanted a major police reform in Oakland with an independent police commission, they came to me to work on the details and to get it done. When activists wanted to strengthen renter protections in Oakland, they came to me because they know I not only support those protections 100%, but I knew how to actually get it done and work the process. When you talk to environmental advocates up in Sacramento or solar energy advocates around the state, they know, most of them will tell you that we need Dan in Sacramento, right? I'm the person who actually knows how to get things done at the state level and has a strong record of accomplishments locally and statewide to show that. We have good people running. Everybody here is a good person, and we do a decent job. I think I stand out as a strong advocate who has the most relevant experience when it comes to getting things done at the local and state level. If you look at my record, look at my endorsements, check out dankolb.net. Very proud of my endorsements throughout the local elected officials, state elected officials, and I'm proud of my record of accomplishments. Thank you so much. I hope I have your support. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Catherine Lieberger.
So California's state government policies have driven the cost of living 42% higher than the national average, but our wages aren't keeping close to that at all. We brag about having the fourth biggest economy in the world, but we don't talk about the highest poverty rate in America. Green tech, it's not an excuse for creating jobs that cut wages in half. We have a lot of big changes coming into this state and changes to the way we do things. But I know what it's like to take on big issues, to take on a big fight, and to win. When we do that, all these big challenges are massive opportunities to right historic wrongs and build thriving communities. And when workers and communities lead on these issues, we can win. As your state senator, I'm eager to work with you. I know that we can get it done.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Sandre Swanson.
Yes, I encourage you all to go to my website, sandreswanson.net. A lot of promises are made during the campaign, but you have a chance to look at my record. I served in the legislature. I have many laws that I've written and a record there for you to review. on what I have done. I want to go back to address this crime wave that we are facing, this crisis with the unhoused, and making our schools full service schools in California #1 in the nation, and providing our children with an education. We have schools in our system where students have to go and teachers have to provide the resources. And we have situations where classrooms are not a great learning environment. Some of these classrooms have mice running around, and so we need infrastructure support for our schools. So I hope you would consider me, visit my website, and answer all your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, for tonight, we have for our forum to close off is Jesse Arguin.
Well, thanks for your time. I'm ready to bring bold and experienced leadership for the East Bay. I've been honored to partner with our neighboring city of Albany on regional issues, and I'm running for the state senate to continue that partnership. I bring 18 years of elected experience and a track record of building coalitions and getting things done. And that's what I'll do in Sacramento. I'm honored to have been endorsed by a growing coalition of labor unions and elected officials. Over 70 elected leaders have endorsed my campaign, including State Senator Dave Cortese, State Senator Bill Dodd, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers and civil rights icon Dolores Huerta, the state building trades, the carpenters, the laborers, the Contra Costa and Alameda building trades, the current and former mayors of Alameda, Berkeley, your mayor, Aaron Tiedemann, Hercules, El Cerrito, Piedmont, and Richmond. They endorse me because they know me, they trust me, and they know that I will deliver for our progressive values. Please join our campaign to bring bold and progressive leadership to Sacramento. I'd be honored to have your endorsement. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we thank you all for being here to inform the Albany neck of your potential future district. And what we have next is going to be a closed session for members who have are full dues paying members and are eligible to vote for a discussion and then a vote. So thank you again so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing the race as it evolves.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for myself as well.
Thank you.
Mayor of Richmond. I'm wondering which mayor is Jesse talking about. Anyway, thank you everybody. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yeah, thank you to the candidates. We'll go into closed session in a moment. And thank you so much for being here and for sharing your information. Okay, let me go back into gallery view so I can see who all's here.
And also, please stop the recording at this point.
Thank you. There we go.